Well, it seems like there's no end to the news coming out from the Donegal GAA. In recent times, there's been a lot happening. The whole debacle with the Carr Resignation situation in the academy. And today came the news that Paddy Carr, who was only appointed back late in 2022, had decided to step away from his position as senior team manager before the completion of the National Football League this weekend. Paddy's decision has come as a real shock to everyone in the county. I know that he was appointed at a very late stage with his coach, Aidan O'Rourke, and since that Paddy Bradley had come on board as well. It hasn't been a good National Football League. Only 3 points gained from their first 6 matches, with the game against Roscommon to come on Sunday, and more importantly, a championship fixture against Down in just over a month's time. John Gildea, former county player, is with me. John, let's start with the Paddy Carr situation. There's lots of other things we need to talk about. Am I accurate in saying a shock that Paddy's decided to pull the plug at this stage?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, Charlie. It's a very unusual situation. 4 weeks from the championship. I know, as you rightly pointed out, we've had a poor league campaign. Things that haven't been going well. There's been a lot of negativity in general around the county. The county team's performances, I suppose, hasn't helped that in any way, shape or form. But it's a very unusual situation. I don't remember seeing anything like it, where you have a senior county management, resigning 4 weeks before you play your first round of the championship. No matter what has gone in the past, because you can always put a positive spin in it. The league was for blood and players. We needed to develop players. Yeah. We've done that, and now you're starting to get maybe what we would say is some of the more recognised, established players coming back from injury, and you think that would have given us a morale boost from a training perspective, and then hopefully put your best foot forward in Down in just over 4 weeks' time. But it's disconcerting to say the least.
Yeah. We know that Paddy Carr was delighted to be appointed to the position of senior team manager. He said it was a dream come true for him. Took a lot of enthusiasm into that job with him. The life's been squeezed out of him, I think, John, because we all know from playing and, of course, people managing as well, if you're being beaten all the time, that has a big effect on you, and you could see it in Paddy in recent times. But at the same time, it is a surprise that he's decided at this particular stage to go, because we are relegated now. We know that, back into Division 2, and as you say, it is a time of transformation. Michael Murphy's gone, Neil McGee gone, a number of other players who've been playing regularly. A lot of young players have come in as well. Some players who we think should be in the panel are not in the panel or haven't been in the panel for a variety of reasons. So this is really a big setback for us, as you say, with championship so quickly coming up the road.
Yeah, it leaves everything very, very uncertain. And as you rightly pointed out, like I've met Paddy Carr as an individual, an absolute gentleman. You've dealt with him on multiple times. Like really good guy. There's nothing negative you could say about that. Obviously results haven't gone our way, and he's taken that very much on board. But I think, again, and I've said this on a number of times in a number of different forums, there has to be a realisation within Donegal circles that we're not the team we were 5 years ago. There's been a huge changing of the guard of what you would say is generational players.
Yeah.
The McGees, the Lacey's, the Michael Murphys, the
Neil
Gallagher's. They don't come along, they don't grow on trees.
Yeah.
And we were blessed for 15 years from the start of the McGuinness era right through to the end of Declan Bourne's era, where we were always contesting, we were always in Ulster finals, we were consistently in Division 1, even though we had a blip and we went down one of the years. So it's, and Paddy came in with all the best intentions in the world. He was enthusiastic, he's a real Donegal supporter all his life, and he came in with a real enthusiasm and love of the game. And I suppose what you would say is, you're right, nearly the enthusiasm and the love and everything else that he had was nearly squeezed out of him. And what I found peculiar with his statement, and again, it left more questions nearly than were answered, is that after discussions with senior members of the Donegal team, he decided to leave. Now,
what can we read into that, John? And we don't know exactly what that meant, but it was a very short statement, but a very direct one, that after discussions with senior players. Does that suggest the senior players said to him, Paddy, you're not the man for the job, we're going nowhere here, Paddy, it might be better if you step away? Or is that too strong to suggest that players would say that? I mean, you've been in that county scene, John, where players have strong opinions, we all know that, and they're entitled to them. Is it a case that maybe they got together after Sunday, after the defeat by Mayo, and said, we need to talk to this man?
Listen, that's one possibility. The issue you have with that is that I don't think if that's the situation, and I suppose it's open to interpretation right now, and we'll talk about both, but if it's senior members of the squad come and saying, Paddy, you're not the man for the job right now, that's not a good precedent to set, because at the end of the day, if you're the manager coming in and you pick your team, you can't have the tail wagging the dog. That's a recipe for disaster. Now, we don't know if that's the situation.
Yeah.
The other side of the equation would be, maybe from Paddy Carr's perspective, is did certain things happen around the team as regards discipline, as regards things happened here, there, or anywhere else? And was it his situation where he went, listen, if you're not going to give me what I need, then I'm leaving as well? And the problem with the statement is we don't know exactly
who instigated the meeting. Was it the players or was it Paddy? And that's a question. On the basis of what we've been told previously, or not told, perhaps more to the point, we might never find out.
And I think that's been a huge problem in Donegal football for not just the last 3 months, but maybe the last 12, 15 months. And we spoke briefly about earlier when Declan's move on. And I remember saying at the time, when there was a huge outcry, let's get rid of Declan Bonner, we've got beaten by Derry, we've got beaten by Cavan, he's not the man for the job. And what I said to people at the time is, people need to be careful what they wish for, because Declan and all the work he'd done with all those players, and for me personally, I think we've been punching for quite some time. We had some exceptional players, and maybe there's been a decline coming for quite some time at a senior level, and now we're finding it difficult to cope with that, in the sense that we're not used to that. We're in Ulster finals 10 or 12 years in a row, and that's what we do. But people forget, for a long time before that we weren't, and there was a struggle, and we grew up with this, and a lot of people have grown up with this golden generation right now, and maybe at this point in time, at the development of this particular squads, they're not as good as that team right now. That's not to say in 5 years' time, when they get bigger and stronger and more mature, we won't be talking about the Oisin Gallans and all these different players as well.
Yes.
But there's an evolution right now, and Paddy was going to be part of that. And for him to come in knowing that they were going to be part of that, and to walk away, and then for these questions again to be left unanswered, only feeds into the rumour mill. It only feeds into the negativity, because you will have people on both sides of the equation. Players asked him to go, he demanded things, the players wouldn't respond, and again we don't know. And I said it again when we went to select the manager very early on, and there was the secretive 3-man committee, and nobody knew who applied for the job. In an absence of information, you create a vacuum, and in that vacuum, rumour, conjecture, malice, everything else creeps into it. And we're looking at the same thing again. And I think there has to be a level of transparency across the board, so that people know what's going on, and we're not having conversations like this going, I wonder what happened.
Yeah.
Because that only feeds into all this negativity that we have in this country.
We're still wondering, a number of months on, what happened to Rory Cavan's situation. Because for a while we understood, we weren't told, but we understood that Rory Cavan was going to be the new Donegal manager after the championship last year. That didn't happen. We're not sure why it didn't happen. No one's come out and said, well, he was or he wasn't. Rory has kept his counsel, which he's quite entitled to do as well. Last week we had Jim coming in, one of the papers, saying that he was prepared to be on board with Rory and Carr, not sure what happened, and that he would have been prepared to come on with others, but he was never contacted. So you say about this vacuum, we can go back to other situations as well, where we wonder, well, what is going on here? Who is selecting this new manager? Why is this being done so secretly? Other counties were appointing managers at the time. Why do we in Donegal have to go down that road, John?
Well, for me, there's no reason for that. I think if you put everything out there, good, bad or indifferent, then people can make their own judgment based on the information that's at hand. The problem is right now is you go back to that 3-man committee, you go to, and I don't want to say the Carr Lacey issue, because it's not a Carr Lacey issue, it's an academy issue, but everybody refers to it as that, and now Paddy leaving. Nobody's come out and said, well, listen, here's the reasons why. There's been a lot of them kind of insinuations, and there's stories backdoored here and somebody writing about something there.
Well, everybody's a different story to tell.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And I think this county board meeting tomorrow night is going to be very interesting, because I think for everybody's sake right now, there has to be a coming clean. Okay, was Rory Cavan offered the job last year? What was the situation? Did he not take it? Why was he not offered, or whatever it might have been? Because again, that's another thing that's hanging out there, and there's all sorts of stories that we heard around the county championship, etc., and we all know what they are. And then the team was selected, it seemed, or the management team was selected for the senior setup, and it seemed to be cobbled together, took weeks and weeks and weeks. And then even when Paddy came in, he didn't have a backroom team, and then there was people pulled in from various different locations, and there was all sorts of rumours around that. So it seemed to be a kind of a cobbled together job to get us over the line, and it has backfired completely to the point now where we're 4 weeks out from playing Down, which was never going to be an easy game anyway.
No.
And we have no county senior manager.
Who has to take responsibility, John? Because I mean, the GAA is built around volunteers, people given a lot of time, a lot of good people given a lot of time. Who's got to grab this by the scruff of the neck now and say, listen, we've got to be much more open about this whole situation. The good, the bad, as you said, John, quite rightly, everything's got to be thrown out on the table and clear the boards instead of this continued speculation about what's going on, this paranoia about the media that seems to be going on in certain quarters as well. Has that all got to stop, or are we just going to go down the dark hole even further?
Well, I think, this really has brought it to a head, because, it's an unprecedented situation to have no county senior manager 4 weeks to play before you play an Ulster Championship quarter-final. I don't know if it's happened anywhere else. Yeah. And then what happens on top of that then is, as a whole, we're up in Donegal, we become the punch bag and the football for the rest of the country to point at and laugh at.
Yeah.
You have Cavan on TV and RT going, isn't it great? We're all in Tyrone laughing at Donegal.
Shambolic, I think was the word he used.
And that's it. And everybody piles in.
We Keegan, Donegal have gone steel.
That's it. Yeah. And everybody piles into it, and then it all compounds itself. So what I think it has to come from the top down, because, I'm not one for blaming county board. All those people give up with their time, they're voluntarily.
Yeah.
And what people need to remember as well, it's not like it's a cartel where, they pass the jobs around among themselves. The clubs vote for all these people. At a convention every year, we have a new county chairman, he's inherited a mess, or whatever the situation might be, and now we have everybody going, oh, well, the county board, it's all the county board's fault. The problem is, that may be true. Maybe it is the county board's fault. But until we get all the information out there, nobody can determine what actually happened, and more importantly, how do we fix it?
That's it.
How do we fix it?
Can we fix it?
Well, anything can be fixed, Charlie. If you have people with the right intentions and want the right things for Donegal football, from underage right through to senior, and they come together with a meeting of minds, and everybody gets their ego out of the way and gets whatever attitudes they have out of the way, anything can be fixed. But in order for it to be fixed, everybody has to know transparently what has happened, what has gone on, what are the issues, and then how do we identify the solutions for those issues.
We've lost our head of academy within the last couple of weeks. Now we've lost our senior team manager within the last couple of weeks. Today, to be more precise, that meeting's tomorrow night, county board meeting. The delegates from all the clubs are going to be there. I'm sure the Paddy Carr situation, I know it's to talk about the academy, but they can't have that meeting without discussing this situation as well. Have the clubs got to take charge, John? I mean, they are the guardians at the end of the day. The county board are appointed by them at convention every year. Do the clubs now have to grab this by the scruff of the neck and say, this is the way we want things done, rightly or wrongly? This is the direction we have to go in from here on in, because too much has gone unsaid, and people wondering, what about this, what about that, and what about the other thing? And this is where we find ourselves today.
No, I'd agree with that. I think all the club delegates represent their membership within their clubs, and they have a responsibility to ensure that they have whatever information that's important to them. And I think the feedback without the county right now is, listen, we want to know what's going on. And it's important that the delegates get that across. And whether that's, maybe there's personalities to the point right now where there's clashes, and if we just look at the academy situation, maybe there's a clash there for whatever reason it might be, then maybe we need to bring in somebody from the outside who's not directly involved on either side of the so-called situation, and sit down and go, okay, here's the information, let's iron it out, and deal with it that way. What I think people need to maybe understand and start realising is, even though this has all been thrown into the one pot, they're two completely separate issues.
Yes.
This academy situation is a situation in its own right, and that'll be dealt with in whatever way it's dealt with. Paddy Carr's situation that's just parachuted in today in the last couple of hours is a completely different situation. Is it driven by the team? Is it driven by individuals within the team? Is it driven by Paddy? That's a whole different scenario. And what will happen is, and the lazy way out of this is, it's all the county board's fault, and we throw the whole thing into one big mess, and it's somebody else's fault, when they are two separate issues that need to be addressed and individually to find out what happened within those individual cases.
One group of people I want to mention just before we finish are the supporters. Because we would consider ourselves to be supporters of the Donegal County team, and people are totally passionate about our senior team. And as you mentioned, the success that we had from the Jim McGuinness era right the way through, and all those Ulster finals and playing in Croke Park. It means so much to so many people. We have to think about them as well, John. They've got to be top of our thoughts in terms of here's what's happened. It was unfortunate, but we're moving on from here now, and we're going to keep you well informed of what's going, because the number of people have said to me, John, and I'm sure you're exactly the same, what is going on there? Why can we not find out things? We've got to think about them as well.
Well, that's the lifeblood of the association, because those people that go and support the county team on a Sunday in the National League or in Championship match are going back to their clubs. They're managers and, kit men and team men and all sorts of things in their own clubs. And for better or worse, when the county team's going well, there's a bounce in everybody's step. That's just the nature of the beast. But it's important that those people feel part of the association, and it can't turn into a them and us type situation where we're all sitting in the house outside speculating, wondering, hearing this story, hearing that rumour. Depending on who you hear from, they have their own agenda, and in this case of Chinese whispers all the time. And the county board have to take responsibility of that right now and say, okay, this is what we're doing, and it has to be driven by the clubs to say, this is what we want. We're at a stage now where we're in an impasse, from all sorts of reasons. We have no academies in place. Our underage footballers are struggling and suffering because of that, which has huge knock-on effects down the line. It doesn't just affect today or tomorrow, it affects, all that stuff has to be dealt with. And then what happened at a county level. And as paying supporters who walk in the gate every day, pay their money, cheer their players and their county team to their utmost, you have to give them the respect to say, here's what happened. And everybody has to do that. County players, if there was a mini coup or whatever you want to call it, have to take responsibility for that. And if that happened, I would anticipate that we should see a statement from the players in some capacity to go, here's the reasons behind it. Because again, you can't have this kind of cartel scenario where everybody's sitting in their own pod going, we'll make decisions for us. We all have a responsibility to the GAA, we all have a responsibility to the game, and we all have a responsibility to our supporters to come and cheer the team and the underage teams and support everybody every week.
Yeah. Let's hope things get better. Things can only get better, perhaps.
Well, fingers crossed.
Thanks for joining us today.
No problem.
Former county player John Gildea joining us here on Donegal Daily and Donegal Sport Hub. Thanks to him for his input. It's been another dramatic and somewhat sad day that the managers had to step down after such a short time in charge. And anybody who's met Paddy Carr will know how passionate he was about managing Donegal and how nice a gentleman. We wish him well for the future, as we do our county team as well.